best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show. We are back with a brand new episode again, deep dive reviewing Star Wars The Acolyte. We are on to episode 4, Day, which was released on June the 18th if you are in America, or the morning of June the 19th here in the UK and Europe. We're back with an all-star squad to help deep dive review this episode. I, of course, am the Jolly Jedi Pete.
I am Jason Hondo Ling.
I am just known as Chris.
I'm Kat Ruthie-Elker.
And as I said, we are back to deep dive review episode 4 of Star Wars The Acolyte, streaming now on Disney+. If you have not watched episode 4, I recommend you pause this podcast, go over to Disney+, watch it, love it, and then come back and listen to us deep dive it. If you don't do that, you will have us spoil the episode, and then you'll watch it and you'll already know what's going to happen, and you'll already have our crazy theories in your head as things unwind. As I said, we're here to discuss episode 4, titled Day. It is directed by Alex Garcia Lopez, and it is written by Claire Cachel and Cor Adar. And as I said, this was released on June 18th in America and June 19th in the morning for the UK and European audience. I'm going to give a brief rundown of the episode, and then we will deep dive into it. So the episode starts sort of where episode 2 finished. Obviously, episode 3 was like the flashback episode. So May and Camilla arrive on Kofar, which is where the Wookiee Jedi Kelnaka has isolated himself. May's mission from her master is to kill Kelnaka without a weapon. Sol leads a team of Jedi, including Osha, Jeki, Yord, and others, to Kofar to apprehend May so that they can at least get the identity of who her master is. Accompanying them is I believe it is a Tainan tracker called Basil, who stole a lot of the accolades of this show. Arriving on Kofar, the Jedi translate the language of the locals on whereabouts on Kofar Kelnaka is residing, and they use an item that belonged to Kelnaka for Basil the tracker to smell and then set off on his hunt to find him. Basil leads Sol's group into the forest. At one point, Osha sets off one of the sort of resting, I believe they're called Umbra moths. They're sort of these little sort of snails / Kabuto-like things from Pokemon, I suppose you could say. And it looks like they can fly sometimes as well, it looks like. And Sol ends up slaying it. May fakes being in trouble so that she can trap Camilla. During their discussion, May says the mission is impossible, and with the revelation that her sister Osha is alive, she is going to turn herself over to the Jedi. Upon arrival at Kelnaka's, she finds that someone has killed Kelnaka, and it's a slash across the chest, very much possibly from a lightsaber. The team of Jedi arrive shortly after May's discovery, and Sol's group demands that whoever's in Kelnaka's home is to surrender immediately. Just then, a mysterious figure appears behind Osha. When Sol's group sees the figure, Sol demands that he surrenders, and he ends up sending Osha flying. As Sol's group starts to attack, the mysterious figure uses the Force to blast on them, and he activates his red lightsaber, and he's about to go on the offensive. And then we fade to black, and we get the credits. It was quite probably the biggest cliffhanger ending we've had in the Acolyte so far. A wild ride for a 30-minute episode, I suppose. Let's just dive in. We'll go to you first, Chris. Obviously, it was a 30-minute episode where we got some good information about sort of May and where she is in her mind about what she wants to do. And we also got to see Kelnaka, who's maybe gone a bit nuts with some of the things he was writing on his walls, I suppose, maybe. It was implied. So we've got some good information here, but apart from the big reveal at the end, it was quite sort of a flash-in-the-pan episode, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite literally a walking through the forest episode. But it was an interesting walk. At least we found some things out when we were going through there. We got to see some new locations, which was cool. And we got the big tease of the Wookiee, which ultimately, unfortunately, we didn't get to see anything. But I think much like with Carrie Ann Moss, sorry, she just is Carrie Ann Moss to me. I can't call her anything else. We didn't get to see him in action in this episode, but I'm fairly sure there'll be a flashback where we'll get to see him. I have seen a little clip from a trailer where that does occur, so I do know we'll get to see that in the future. But as you say, there wasn't a huge amount that happened in the episode. It was a lot of walking and walking and walking and a bit more walking. But then we had that little sort of face turn from May at the end there, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. I think I'll wait to comment on that until we get to that part in the episode. But it was a bit quick for me.
Kat, let's go to you. Let's talk about May. And obviously, I think May now seems to be maybe looking to find a different path now that she knows her sister is alive and that maybe she wasn't responsible for the events that killed all of her family.
I'm not sure where May's head at is right now. Is she really thinking of turning herself into the Jedi and the Galactic Republic? Or was she trying to lure Kelnaka into a false sense of security? In her previous conversation with Camilla, she's basically complaining about how impossible this task seems to be able to kill a Jedi without a weapon. And we know from Jedi we've seen in the past that they are very much against striking down someone who is defenseless, who isn't armed. So was May actually turning, or was she setting up this very clever ploy of pretending to change her mind to lure Kalnaka into this sense of security so that she could get very close to him in order to be able to defeat him without a weapon? I'm not sure. This episode was very fast. There was a lot going on moving wise, that all these conversations going on throughout the forest on Kafar. And it's a piece of a puzzle. We are watching a mystery show and we're getting all these little pieces, but we don't yet have the full picture.
We certainly don't. I thought when May was, speaking to Camilla about it, and when she trapped him, and she was talking about like, Osha's alive, and that changed everything for me. I maybe saw hope in her face. I thought maybe, but I mean that doesn't mean anything. And like, is the plan to surrender and go to jail and have a sister, or would the plan be to escape and run away with your sister? I suppose. But yeah, I'm not quite sure on that. Jason, let's go to you. Sort of, what was your thoughts on May and sort of how she's maybe changing her thoughts on the whole process? You are muted, Jason. I think you might need to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I think the first first couple of episodes, obviously, May was very determined. She was out for revenge. There was a lot of hatred, and I think then the reveal that her sister was alive, and maybe she didn't know the full story, it sort of made sense then that she start questioning everything that she believed in. So yeah, it was quite interesting the way that changed very quickly in this episode. But I was wondering if Camilla's a character that, to me, just as a viewer, it's quite clear he sort of knows more than he's letting on. And I think in her conversations with him, I think she was starting to realise that maybe he knew more than he was letting on, and that he had a plan that maybe was against her or not the way she wanted to go. So it was quite interesting to see that she set him up to trap him. But then I think she also sees herself as sort of being a cut above him almost. But the question that a lot of people are asking is there more to him? And I felt from the conversations in this episode, there's definitely something hidden there.
Definitely. Moving on from Kamehameha, I suppose, Kelnaka gets, he's the main focus point of this episode, I suppose. They're all looking for Kelnaka. The Jedi are looking for Kelnaka. May and Camille are looking for Kelnaka. And he seems to be a Jedi who not only has he put himself separate from sort of the Jedi Order and society, I suppose, but he's also, I think if you look at that first episode when Carrie Ann Moss's character, is fighting May, and she notices May's markings on her forehead that are given to her by her mother during the ceremony in episode 3. Markings that are on May's mother's forehead as well. And Kanaka seems to have them written all over the inside of his apartment, or base, should we call it. I don't know what your thoughts were, Chris, on sort of the state of Kelnaka and like what he was doing in his isolation.
Oh, the absolute state of him, mate. He was living a bachelor single lifestyle out there. I mean, he was in his little hovel. He was off collecting meat and chasing away people and just sort of isolating himself. I mean, he wasn't living what we'd maybe call the best life, but maybe for a Wookiee, it's not an unfamiliar life, except he was on the ground, sort of up in the trees. I mean, he's clearly isolated himself off for a reason. And one thing I thought was a bit interesting is, was there anything to the whole lightsaber thing? When Saul draws his lightsaber and the moth immediately goes for the blade, it's drawn towards the light. Is there anything to Kalnaka kind of surrounding himself with wildlife that would immediately go for lightsaber blades?
Quite possibly, I think that could be a thing. It's one thing when we've seen Kalnaka hunting at the end of episode 2 and he comes back and he scares the strangers off from his swamp, Shrek style. He didn't seem to be armed, and then when we first see him come into the house in this episode, he's got his cloak over his head, but he's not. I don't think he's armed then. It's not until he's sitting down and he's playing around, cooking his food, that we see him. The lightsaber's like on his belt, I suppose. He also seems to be eating vegetarian. Don't know if anyone noticed that. I'm not saying that's all he eats, but he seemed to be cooking up a grass stew of some sort. Let's go to you. What was your thoughts on sort of Kelnaka drawing the markings that are on both May and the witch mother, like around this house, almost like we would almost see someone doing Arkham Asylum in a Batman comic?
It did definitely strike me as something that someone who has gone through an experience would be doing, almost like a stress relief of continuously doing these patterns, constantly reminiscing or remembering a event, in which case it has to be linked to Brendock and whatever happened on Brendock. But each pattern was definitely the markings that Mother Anastasia, May, and other just sort of circles just repeated and repeated. It reminded me of Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, where the Doctor is always drawing. He's trying to draw a map the whole time, and it sort of reminded me of that. It's constantly on Kelnaka's mind, and it did sort of cross my mind of, has Kelnaka sort of borderline gone mad, or is he in such deep trauma that he's abandoned his post on Kofar? He's living out in the woods, isolated from everyone. I mean, his cooking skills were pretty questionable. It doesn't look like he was taking care of himself or his surroundings. And yeah, he definitely wasn't in a good mental state.
And I think going back to those creatures, the Umbra moths, again, if he's chose to put his shelter, his house, like somewhere that's hard to get to, then it's because he doesn't want to be bothered. And it seems that the Jedi Order sent him there because he has to go there, and then they might send him transmissions now and again, which he never responds to, and they don't really mind. And it's a bit like, oh well, yeah, like Kalnaka's just there, it's okay type of thing. No one asks any questions. I wonder, which is obviously a lot more reminiscent of the Jedi, of the prequel trilogy, which is what we're heading towards. The markings that not just on Kalnaka's walls, but also the markings on May and her mother, they remind me a little bit of the sort of the mosaic puddle that is in The Last Jedi. That's like a yin and yang, someone meditating with lightsaber blade, black and white, pebble mosaic. I don't know if you know the one I mean, Kat.
I do.
And I'm not saying it is exactly the same because it's not, but just the way it swirls around and the way sort of the white blends in with whatever it's on, so it's on the background of what it's drawn on, or on May's skin. It just reminds me of that. I don't know if you thought the same, or if anyone else thought the same or not.
Well, circles always represent a balance, a continuation, often representing life as well. So it could be that for the witches of this coven, they're using circles in a similar way to perhaps represent balance between the thread of destiny, and then the Jedi use it to show the balance between light and dark, the two sides of the Force. But I think the symbolism is definitely there. I think maybe if we do go back to Brendok in another flashback, that maybe we'll learn more about the Coven and what the circles represented, what the moons represented to them.
Definitely. Let's go to you, Jason. Sort of, what's your thoughts on sort of Kelnaka and his situation, and have you got any theories on Kelnaka's mad drawings in his hut?
Kalnaka, like Torbin, has clearly sort of retreated and is sort of almost reflecting on what's happened on Brendok, I think. I think we're over the time we're going to see more of what has actually happened there. And obviously, this has had a clear effect on all four of these Jedi's, but it seems to have affected these two in particular. Seeing him sort of living this hobbit, this sort of lifestyle, sort of reminds you of like when Yoda's gone into hiding after the events of, Palpatine taking control and everything. So it seems to be that the Jedi, when it all goes wrong, go into a reflective mode and then have to try and understand what's happened to them. And I think this is what's been happening to Kalnaka. And obviously, we know that the Wookiees love to surround themselves with nature and everything. So it's a natural sort of way for him to really go and find himself again.
Definitely. And I suppose while we're talking about Kelnaka, obviously we find Kelnaka dead, so we'll go to you first, Chris. What's your thoughts on how Kelnaka died?
I mean, it was a bit of a bait and switch, like I said. What kind of, all going all the way towards him. It's what all the journey's about, and then there's that trope, isn't it? Of that thing that we were going to do has already happened. I mean, clearly, it is supposed to be a lightsaber that has killed him, and then we've got the. I'm gonna say a Sith. He hasn't been officially introduced as that, but I'm assuming a Sith. It appears not long afterwards. But the question is, how long has that Sith been there when it killed Kalnak? I mean, was it just hovering around watching May? Was it a character, Kamir, that was already there and then just kind of run off and had stashed a suit somewhere and a helmet and then killed Kanaka in one blow, seemingly without much of a fight? Again, a bit like last week, it seems like all of the pieces aren't there. We're seeing the end result, but not what happened.
I know what you mean. Kat, let's go to you. How do you think Kelnaka died?
Well, that's definitely a lightsaber wound across his chest that killed him. but who wielded the lightsaber? May immediately jumps to the conclusion that it is her master, some dark side force user, not necessarily a Sith, I'd say. I'm thinking it's just a dark sider, but we'll see. But is that too easy? Is it too easy to say that it was the dark side user? Is it too obvious? The conclusion may jump to. There are a lot of Jedi on that planet, on Kofar, looking for Kelnaka. I don't know. But we are seeing this from May's point of view, that whole scene. And I would say she's quite an unreliable narrator at this point.
Kat, I'm going to put something out there. This character could be alive during this time period. Do we think that Nubs has got in there and killed Kelnaka?
He's a little short for the Wookiee.
He can jump, though. He can do Jedi flips.
Nah, Nubs is a good guy. Nubs will always be good. Unless he didn't like Kelnaka's stew.
I don't think he would like. I know Nubs likes a lot of food, but I don't think he would like that. I know him like that stew. No one at all. Yeah, just craziness, isn't it? I think moving on from that, I suppose, Kelnaka's sort of the main Jedi who we're looking at here. We see the Jedi on Coruscant again in this episode, and we see sort of Vanestra Rose sort of team who are looking into this. And some of those end up going on the mission with Master Sol, Jackie and Yod. Obviously, some of them stay behind. One of them is, of course, Kaidi Mundi, which I didn't even realise till someone tweeted about it, but I did not watch the credits this week. Usually I do, so he was named in the credits. So let's just go start there. We'll start with you, Kat. Just what was your thoughts on Vanestra Rose, like her opinions on things and her team's approach to stuff, and then obviously the team that went actually to Kofar. What was your thoughts on that?
I thought Vanestra's reaction was very much in character for her. This is a Jedi who has gone through a lot of tragedy, and she ultimately wants to protect all of the Knights, Padawans, younglings that are under the care of the Jedi. You can see that she is very adamant of not bringing the Galactic Republic and senators into this. She doesn't want politics brought into the Jedi, and that makes a lot of sense. Earlier in the High Republic, when you're looking at the fall of Starlight Beacon and Vernestra becoming a Jedi Knight herself, she has seen how bureaucracy can slow down the Jedi, or it can get in the way of their beliefs. And that ultimately led to a lot of lives lost on Starlight and other missions when she was much younger. So her reaction made a lot of sense to me from reading the books, and if you know Vanestra's character. And yes, it was interesting that the other Jedi Masters who are responding to this potential threat, how they are very wary of May and this potential dark side force user. You'll notice, I think they mention a splinter order. They're fearful of a splinter order training force users. And I think, again, this stems back to earlier in the High Republic when the Nile were causing trouble, and the conclave of Jeddah, multiple different groups of force users, all calling it different things: the Ashla, the Force, the Fred, the Wills. And if they can't coexist peacefully with the Jedi, I think ultimately the Jedi do see other force using factions sometimes as a threat. Perhaps we're starting to see the hubris here grow of the Jedi, of them thinking that only their way of accessing the Force is the correct way. So yeah, it was interesting. You're seeing the start, I think, of the kind of councils and Jedi masters that we're much more used to recognizing in the Phantom Menace. But I am glad that Sol was determined to fight for May's corner, really, and say that yes, there is still a potential that she could come back to the light.
Jason, what was your thoughts on sort of like how all of the rest of the Jedi, apart from Kalnaga, were sort of portrayed in the episode and what they were doing?
Yeah, I like I like the fact that we've had no mention of the Sith. So this is still they're up against something that is unknown. Which the more I see of especially at the end of the episode, this Sith Master, I think it is more of an unknown. Is he a Sith? That's going to be revealed. You know, we've got more of a story to tell. The Jedi are clearly they're working together, but there's clear divisions at some of the ways that decisions should be made. But at the same time, it is more of it comes across more as like a formal organisation and everything. And you've got this control room where you've got all these different characters. And obviously, Ki-Adi-Mundi's been the one that everyone's sort of like, wow, you know, this is a character we all know from the prequel trilogy. And it's interesting to see, obviously, how he gets to where he's got to. And I think we discussed previously, you know, there'd been lots of rumours that maybe we'd see Jedi that we already knew from the original High Council, which I didn't think we would. So it was a bit of a surprise for me. And obviously, I, like you, hadn't even twigged it was Ki-Adi-Mundi until someone else mentioned it to me, because I was too busy convinced that Dave Filoni had shoehorned Plo Koon in there. But it's since been confirmed it's a different character. But I was sort of looking at all these different Jedis, and it was like, oh yeah, that's a bit different. And so I enjoyed the fact that we were seeing all sorts of different Jedi discussing, working on a plan. And I actually enjoyed seeing that part of the story, and I think it's building more of our understanding of where the Jedi are at this point of the story.
The sequence on Coruscant in the temple with the control panels and stuff, and you know the consoles and the gathering and speaking, it reminded me of sort of the Clone Wars meeting rooms and the discussing sieges and things like that. So I wonder if this is like the aftermath of sort of the Nile. Obviously, it seems at this point the Nile threat's gone, but it seems like maybe there's a small part of the Jedi Temple that's used to sort of look for the next threat, so they can be ready for it, I suppose, almost. And yeah, I agree. I think it's good that, you know, none of these Jedi are thinking about the Sith. You know, I think Ki-Adi-Mundi, I know it's been told in like previous stories, perhaps, that are no longer canon about his birth year and doesn't match up with the series and things like that. But I think that's quite sort of superficial material. And as anything before 2015, I think is like no longer canon anyway. But I think, you know, in the prequel trilogy, he does state the Sith have been extinct for millennia, and he seems quite sort of adamant that the Sith are not back when Qui-Gon first brings it up. And I think in this episode here, you know, Ki-Adi-Mundi does not go too far. You know, and he just knows that they're dealing with somebody who's been trained in the Force, and again, they think it's probably more Splinter Cell. Probably linked again to what Kat was saying about what the Jedi dealt with on Jeddah during the High Republic era, especially in the earlier phase. Let's go to you, Chris. Just obviously, what's your thoughts on the Jedi and what they're up to, and on Master Ki-Adi-Mundi being back?
Well, it was a surprise. Definitely, I wasn't expecting him there. Then he suddenly pops up, and it does raise a lot of questions, because, well, I say either he's sort of blissfully ignorant to what ultimately is going on, or he's, I suppose, something that would add a different layer to him in episode 1, as he's deliberately misleading the council for whatever reason. But the Jedi are seemingly locked up in a lot of politics, and I mean, not that this is something they've ever not done. We haven't seen them do before, but they're very, they want to make sure that this doesn't get up to the High Council, because then that means it goes to the Senate, which means that the enemies will use it against them. And this isn't necessarily the wisest decision to be making from an overall point of view, but from maybe just preventing their enemies. But who are their enemies at this point? The political enemies that we have. This, at least, I mean, if someone can fill me in, because I haven't read the High Republic novels, I'd like to know who are their who are their enemies that they're so desperately trying to keep this information from. But before anybody answers that, the only thing that I really care about for Kiari-Mundi is that he still has his 4 wives.
I think he definitely has his 4 wives. Might even have a 5th wife. Maybe he had a 5th wife but got divorced before the prequels happened.
That sounds like him, to be honest.
It does indeed. He's got more wives than Ric Flair, maybe.
Oh,
I know. But is he a 60-minute man? I don't know. Kat, you are obviously our sort of resident expert in the High Republic. I suppose, I don't know if you're going to talk about what the Jedi went through, during the sort of the hyperspace disaster and the subsequent fall of Starlight, and how sort of the Republic's view of them changed a little bit, and obviously the fact that the Nile was sort of their last great enemy was the Nile, I would imagine, at this point.
Absolutely. So the High Republic is split into many different phases. In the earliest we've seen of the High Republic, which is actually in phase 2 of the novels and comics, we see that we have an early threat to the Jedi, which is Path of the Open Hand, and the Children of the Path believe that the Jedi shouldn't be using the Force in the way that they are, controlling it, and this is the early start of what will become the Nile. That is what we see then during phase 1, spearheaded by Marchion Ro, that the Nile want to take a part of the galaxy from the Republic and from the Jedi. This leads to the Great Hyperspace Disaster, as the Nile are able to use their path ships to enter hyperspace lanes and go through their own hyperspace lanes that are inaccessible to the rest of the galaxy, causing shipping lane crashes, huge destruction. They destroy Starlight Beacon. The Republic Fair, which is supposed to be a wonderful gathering of citizens of the galaxy, they completely invade and nearly kill the Chancellor at this point. But the Nile are gone at this stage when the Acolyte is taking place. The Nile are gone. That threat has been dealt with, but it certainly has shown that the Jedi have weaknesses and they are not infallible. So the Republic probably has maybe a little less faith in the Jedi, and they also know that the Jedi way isn't the only way. They've been shown that through different factions of Force users and through the propaganda that the Nile spread. But currently, during the Acolyte, there is no real threat to the Jedi. This is a time of peace, and the Jedi are simply peacekeepers with stations around the galaxy just to be perhaps breaking up local skirmishes or just system disputes. So nothing on a intergalactic scale. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people who perhaps disapprove of the Jedi. Not everybody necessarily in the Republic Senate will approve of the Jedi. Not everyone, like the Trade Federation, will approve of the Jedi and their ways. I think some see them perhaps as meddlesome. So, although there is true peace, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Jedi don't have their haters at this point.
And I think the Jedi are probably hesitant about, they went through an awful lot of trauma, and the galaxy went through an awful lot of trauma after dealing with the Nile and the hyperspace disaster. So although that's like in the past, I imagine in their minds it's a bit like we need to be ready for when the next thing comes. And the problem is that down the line they get so used to peace, and then Palpatine's able to do what he does, I suppose. Like I said, I just want to go back to say I don't think any of these Jedi think it's a Sith. I don't think the word Sith has even entered their brains at this point, and I don't think it will. I think the ones who see the Sith user probably are going to pass away, I would imagine, before it can go any higher. But that's just my thoughts. Let's talk about the star of the episode then. Let's talk about the Star Tracker, Basil. Let's go to you, Jason. What are your thoughts about the Star Tracker, Basil, and how much did you love seeing him run around and scream?
Obviously, this was a character that they sort of, a couple of days before the episode dropped, all of a sudden I seemed to see the internet exploding about this little character. And obviously the actor that played him had previously been inside R2-D2 for the Rise of Skywalker. And if you've seen any of the little documentaries, and I'm frantically trying to find it, Hassan Taj is the guy, and he is a real character, and someone that I'd seen interviewed, and you could tell this guy really loves Star Wars and really loves being in character. And I think he brought that to the performance, this little beaver sort of character running around frantically trying to find this Jedi. And, you see all these other Jedi following him. But then he disappears and then he reappears and he's all over the place. But no, he's a really fun character. And Neil Scanlon and his guys obviously have created a great creature here that I'm sure that will pop up all over the place now. And, that's one of the things with Star Wars, these little creatures that all of a sudden become part of the story and an important part of the story for the fans.
Definitely. Chris, what was your thoughts on the wonderful screaming Basil?
He was a nice little bit of comic relief in this episode. I think we needed something that was literally driving us towards the goal. I'm all for Basil. I'm excited for his spin-off that we'll get this time next year. Yeah, more Basil. Not a good thing. Hopefully he doesn't get killed in the forthcoming dark side attack.
Kat, 2 questions for you. Number 1 is, will you get a Basil Build-A-Bear when that eventually comes out?
Absolutely.
And number 2 is, how did Yord get cuter with the fact he'd learned how to speak to Basil in his own tongue?
That was such a Yord thing, wasn't it? He couldn't learn Shiri work. He couldn't do something the normal way. He had to go and learn a super obscure alien language. It was just pure Yord. I love that moment. And
On a scale of 1 to Yord Horde, are you whereabouts are you?
full Yord Horde. Yord Horde. I think he is such a fun character. He is a goofball Jedi. He's trying to. I think he sleeps with like the Jedi Order textbook underneath his pillow, and he's trying to be to the book. But in the end, he just ends up looking really goofy.
He does indeed. I suppose diving in from all of this, I suppose let's talk about the reveal. So sort of the Jedi approach Kanaka's hut. They also ask Osha to like stay behind, like Solas to do. And then as the Jedi approach, we see sort of, as Chris has already highlighted, this, we believe it's May's Sith Master, who I believe is the Sith Apprentice maybe, sort of Mary Poppins it into frame in a very creepy way. I got really creepy vibes the way I almost like had to open my eyes again. I'd be like, is he there? Yes, he is. And he sort of crept down. Obviously loves the theatrical. And then, like I said, he ignites his lightsaber as he's holding Osha in front of him, and then he throws her away with the Force and then confronts all of his Jedi at once, where he's obviously feeling very confident. I suppose we'll go to you first, Jason. Just what's your thoughts on the reveal of the dark side red lightsaber wielding person, and like, what's your thoughts on who he is and what he's going to do?
Right, when I saw this scene and I saw the light up of the saber and everything, I loved it. All Star Wars, and the way he came down out of the darkness, very over dramatic. I thought this is great. And obviously, what I like is that I've seen lots of comments about nicknames for this character, and I instantly thought of Kat when I got told that he's been referred to as Smilo Ren because of the teethy smile and the resemblance to Kylo Ren's helmet. And I thought, I love that. And the other one's Darth Teeth, which, doesn't do anything for me. But this character, with the way he's come into it, and obviously we've all discussed here, we all think it's Khmer. But I'm beginning to think that's a little bit too obvious. And I'm hoping that it could be something completely different. And seeing the face light up, that to me gave a lot of, rather than Sith, a lot of the Knights of Ren sort of feel to me, which, I thought, could this series be going slightly different, or could there be more to the story? But yeah, his reveal and the way he just threw Osha away, it was like he was almost using her to lure the Jedi that were his real target. And once she'd done her job, it wasn't that he wanted to take her, and she can be dealt with at a later stage. Now's the time to deal with these Jedi. And then obviously seeing all those sabers light up, it was that made the episode for me.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I think again, I think Chris has said, sort of we're journeying through the episode, on the hunt through the forest, and then it all kicks off at the end, and then we have the rug pulled from us just before the tension is about to go berserk. I don't know what your thoughts were, Chris, about how this, dark side red lightsaber wielding person sort of studies Osha, and then he does throw her to the side. He doesn't just put the lightsaber through her, which he could have done. He had time to kill her and then move forward against the Jedi, but he does throw her to the side. Do you think maybe he has motivations to keep Osha alive and turn her, or do you think there's anything like that going on?
Quite possibly. I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, if we take it at face value, and if he's been watching, or if he's Khmer or whatever, and he's like, right, okay, well, May's trying to turn around on me, but if you won't do it, then perhaps your sister will, and then he'll be trying to turn Osha to the dark side. That makes the most sense. But he does sort of just. So he doesn't literally lay a finger with her, but he just flicks her to one side like a little bug. Just boop, get out of here. I'm about to wreck some shit. And then we get that frustratingly excellent moment at the end where they all draw their lightsabers, and then he pushes them away, and then that's it for next week. Or maybe next week. They may do a flashback episode. We don't get this for another 2 weeks, but we will see. I think the internet might explode if they do that.
That's like the South Park season 2 premiere, where you meant to find out who Eric Cartman's dad is, but instead it's a Terrence and Phillips special.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot all about that. Yes, it's definitely along those lines. So I've no idea what's coming next week, but I hope for everyone's sake that it is the second part of this fight. But it's interesting. I mean, I also everything's pointing towards Khmer, but I hope it is somebody else, because it's a bit unsatisfying of an answer, because they haven't done a great job at hiding it if it is him. I don't know if we've necessarily got any other major candidates, but yeah, we'll wait and see on that. But the way that he entered in, very, very cool, like a sort of vampire descending down to the ground. I was thinking very, very different to how other Darksiders have been introduced and appeared before, but it was definitely creepy, and they had that kind of reverse string pull going on that just kind of infused it with all of these horror vibes. And he's got this very interesting look. I'm not sure if I'm all here with his smiley face. Might be a little bit too on the nose for me, but it's definitely a cool look.
Yeah, I think they've certainly pointed everyone in the direction that it could be Camilla, which makes me think that's probably a false push, and like it's going to be something else that we're not ready for. But I think May had secured Camilla up, and then he'd somehow got free to then kill Kanaka, then hide and attack the Jedi. Maybe, but maybe not. I suppose time will tell. Kat, let's go to you. What was your thoughts on sort of this whole final sequence of sort of the red lightsaber wielding dark side force user who's probably a Sith? Confronting Osha and then confronting the Jedi, and the way he entered the frame, I suppose, as well.
Oh, I got literal chills. This scene was so... It was horror vibes, but we've also actually seen it before. The way he floats through the air, the second sister loved doing that in Jedi Fallen Order. She did that kind of entrance as well. So I love that tie-in to Triller. But yeah, everything about this scene was these dark gothic horror vibes. The movements of this character very choppy, almost robotic or puppeteering. It's so well done. And yeah, there's a lot of good theories. I like the thought that he could be a Knight of Ren, because Ren is a title passed down from whoever defeats the previous Ren, then takes on that title. And the mask is certainly reminiscent of those that the Knights of Ren wear. And the leader of the Knights of Ren usually wields a red lightsaber, so it would certainly fit. I don't think it's Camilla, though. Nothing in this interaction makes me think it's Camilla. The body language doesn't seem like Camilla's, and we're assuming it is a guy. I know everybody is referring to the master as a he, but look, put a mask on and some robes, nobody's going to be able to tell. So my wild theories are this: either May and Osha are triplets, and the mysterious dark side user is actually their sibling, in Mother Anastaea's bargaining to use the Force to create the girls. She had to perhaps give up another child. Or my other theory is that the dark side Force user is actually Mother Anastaea.
Wow, I think that's two awesome theories. I think that I didn't have on my bingo card, but they're pretty wild and pretty cool, pretty awesome.
I want to raise that slightly. Because I'd had a similar discussion, and I'd actually said not necessarily Mother Anastaea, but Mother, is it Kirill, the other mother? Because obviously she was very angry throughout the episode that we saw, and I don't think we ever saw her body.
Quite possibly. Chris, who do you think's behind the mask?
Oh,
are we going to get a Kane-like unmasking?
I mean, if it's Glenn Jacobs over there, that would be the ultimate twist, definitely. I don't know. I mean, they've sort of given us I mean, Camilla seems like the most obvious choice, and so I hope it isn't him, but it does seem to be the obvious one. But then there's also the logistics of what. So did he just have that like helmet and dark robes kicking around? Was it in his bag? I didn't see him with any big bags like that, did he? Maybe they were packing something. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think that he was carrying that around in that way. I really do. I've got to be honest, I don't know. And I suppose if there's one thing to say about the show, it's I don't know. If it doesn't end up being Camilla, then I'll be I'll be surprised by whoever it is. It's definitely a humanoid. So I think a lot of people were thinking that, from a distance, maybe they were trying to hide this character, and it may have ended up being like Plagueis or somebody else. But it's definitely a humanoid that's behind there. I think that triplet theory is interesting. I hate it, but it might be going that way.
I
It
wonder
might
how
not be triplets. It could be that the girls were twins, and then we had another child. I'm not sure, but Mavra was powerful, so
Like the one they kept in the basement.
maybe her first child through the Force was a boy. I mean, that coven is clearly women only, so maybe they did like the Dathomirians do, and the boys have to go off and have their own club.
that could be. It's definitely something in there, I think, and definitely does tie in. So speaking of, obviously, we see all the Jedi and get the lightsabers, and it looks fantastic. And then we see the Sith push back, which is equally fantastic. Obviously, I imagine in the next episode, if it continues this timeline, is that we will see the showdown. My thoughts are that Jeki, Yord, and Sol are probably going to survive, and those other Jedi who are almost a la red shirts from Star Trek, who just joined the team for this week, are probably going to bite the dust. I'll go to you first, Jason. What's your thoughts on the Jedi versus this Sith, and who do you think is going to die?
Yeah, I'm with you on the red shirts. Definitely these guys that have just been drafted in as cannon fodder, I think are pretty much destined to meet the Maker. It wouldn't surprise me if one of the three Jedi that you mentioned actually also gets slain, because they don't seem to be too wary about killing off main characters in this series. So that could be another shocker for us.
Maybe I do. I definitely see what you mean there. I also think it was that the main characters they've killed off are characters from the past, from that sequence of events
Yeah.
happening with the fire. So, and like the new main characters are like Jeki and Yord and stuff who we haven't. But I mean, like I said, I suppose because these characters don't turn up anywhere else, they've got free reign to do with as they please, I suppose. Kat, what's your thoughts? Which Jedi are going to die? Do you think? And do you hope it's not Yord?
Oh, I hope it's not Yord. I would really miss Yord. I do agree, though. I think that the other Jedi are going to be slaughtered by this dark side Force user, because they have to show that whoever it is a threat. And the only way to do that really is for them to kill Jedi. So, in order to raise the stakes to be high enough to make this dark side Force user enough of a threat, those Jedi have to die. But Sol could be in trouble, I think.
Yeah, quite possibly. One thing I like is that like Kelnacker's dead, and the Kelnacker and Sol are really like May's mission, not this dark side Force user's mission, right? But sort of he's decided to like lure the Jedi to this hut, it seems like, and then he's floated down, and then he's attacked them, and very confidently. So this guy is certainly confident in his abilities and not fazed by how many Jedi he's fighting, which is wild, but also really, really fun, I suppose. Chris, we'll go to you. Is there any sort of, because that's the end of the episode, is there any, how did you feel when the credits come up? I know I felt like I had the rug pulled from under. I was like, oh God, you kidding? What? Like, I just about to get nuts. Like, I was almost like Michael Keaton. I was like, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. That's what I was saying. Like, it's about to get nuts, man. Come on. But then I had 5 minutes, and I was like, no, I need to get ready for work. And then I did that instead. But yeah, what was your thoughts on sort of how it ended and how it made you feel? And then, is there any talking points that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up about the episode or the Acolyte in general?
I was definitely a bit disappointed, but at the same time, I like it. It's a nice little tease for the next week. You definitely want to watch next week. If it picks up from where it left off, we might get a good majority of an episode that's a really kind of big battle and a lot of intense scenes going on there. So I'd rather that they did that than just cram it into the last 30 seconds of a of an episode. In terms of points that hadn't been brought up, I think Sol is definitely in danger, as was just mentioned. He does that classic, "I'll tell you everything as soon as we get back to the ship," which usually suggests they're not going to get back to the ship. So I'm a bit worried for Sol because I really like him. But maybe I won't by the end of the series when it's revealed what actually happened there. I think, though, as I said, this episode was fairly straightforward. It was an A to B episode. The main talking point that came out of this episode was the appearance of the maze master, if not the actual master. But we're still no further forward in working out who that could be. We don't actually know what he's capable of either. But I do feel like we're going to find out starting in the next episode.
Certainly, what I thought was that with the way he converted himself and the way he's sort of not using May anymore, like we thought May was the Acolyte, but what if this guy is actually the Acolyte?
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. I mean, I don't think that I think May is as skilled as she is. I think she's auditioning for the role. I don't think that she's anywhere near it yet. So if anything, this let's call him Smilo. I think if Smilo is looking for his apprentice so that he can kill his master and then take the rightful place as is tradition.
Definitely. Jason, let's go to you. What was your thoughts when the episode ended, and then just any points that we haven't discussed about the episode of Acolyte that you want to talk about?
I think when it ended, it was like, okay, next week's the big one. Obviously, the obvious thing is we have reached midpoint in the season. So we've had a few reveals, but I think there's a lot more to come. And I think we've seen nearly everything that we've seen in the trailers now, so we're heading into new territory. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's happening. I'm hoping that we're right in what we're saying. There's more twists and turns to come, because at the moment things are looking a little bit too obvious. And I'm hoping that what we're about to get is going to go, wow, didn't expect that to happen. So yeah, it's got us to a point now where I think, I'm still looking forward and hoping for a lot more to come of this.
Definitely, I think there's a lot more to come. Just to clarify as well, the next episode's directed by the same person, so Alex Garcia Lopez. So I would imagine, this was shot all over the place in on location. So I imagine it was probably similar locations to the previous episode. So that probably means that we're not getting a different type of episode. I'm about to say that. It's also one of the writers is the same as well. So I'm not saying that means I'm right, but it leads us to think that we probably are getting the conclusion to what the cliffhanger we've just seen in episode 4. We're going to get the conclusion of that in episode 5. Because like I said, it's the same director and one of the writers is the same as well. Kat, let's go to you. Is there anything, I know you are probably the best notes taker out of everybody in Team Star Wars. So is there anything on your notes or anything that you've seen that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up?
I think the only thing on my notes is actually just when we were talking about Basil, we sort of didn't really cover like why the Jedi needed a tracker for Kelnaka. And basically it's sort of clarifying how the Force does and doesn't work, because the Force isn't a GPS. Although individuals can sense each other through the Force, it's not going to give you location finding services. It's not like an iPhone or a GPS. So I thought having Basil be the tracker actually was really clever, because where Kelnaka is in the forest is so full of life anyway, but it's kind of masking his presence within the Force, which again, I wonder is deliberate. We do see him being very reclusive. And if he sort of surrounded himself in this creepy forest full of really creepy moths to deliberately sort of hide his presence in the Force without fully retreating from it. So, yeah, just basically wanted to mention that a little bit of lore about Basil, really.
Yeah, no, that was really cool. And then I also like sort of the beginning as well when they were speaking to the locals, and I think Jackie's using sort of the translator machine was pretty cool as well to see that. And Kat, we'll go to you again. Like, what was your thoughts with how the episode ended, and sort of how excited are you for next week?
It was like being slapped in the face with that black screen. I wanted to know what happened next. I wanted to know where it was going. That half an hour went by so quickly. And yes, I just need the cliffhanger resolved. What is Smilo going to do next? Is he using Osha's fear to power himself? And that's why he's so confident stepping into a host of Jedi with their lightsabers blazing. I am very excited for that battle sequence. And I think setting it in the dark in a creepy forest is going to create some incredible visuals.
I've had a thought about this battle that we might get next week as well. So we've had the Umbra moths, like we've seen them on the trees, and we've seen one wake up and get sliced in half by Saul, right? Other than that, they were just there for that moment. Do you think they're going to join the battle or not? We'll talk to you first, Chris. Are the big creepy Kabuto moths going to join the battle?
I mean, that could be a sort of, Purgill Space Whales moment of, oh, this has just turned it on a head, and this is the only way that they can get away from, this dark side user who's incredibly powerful, and then he's just got to he's caught up in cutting them down left, right, and center. That could be a thing. They might pop up later, maybe. I'm not expecting it, but I'll be watching out for them now.
Jason, you think we're going to see the Umbra moths get involved?
What a great idea, but I think we've seen a slice and dice, and I think that was their sole purpose, to show that Sol does know how to use his lightsaber.
Kat, are you up for some Umbra moth slice and dicing in the next episode?
I think that could happen. I wonder if Osha may connect with them to try and protect herself, because she clearly could sense them in the Force, even though her connection with it seems tenuous at the moment.
And sort of before we wrap things up, I've got a thought. Obviously, we haven't really seen Osha dive into her Jedi teachings much since we met her, but we know she obviously trains as a Jedi for like a few years. Was Saul's apprentice, so was, I imagine, a good student and a good level Jedi. Let's go to you first, Chris. I suppose. Do you think we're going to see Osha use some of those Jedi teachings and use the Force? Maybe pick up a lightsaber. What do you think?
I think she's got to. I mean, she was hinting that she was, reconnecting with things. She's feeling things again. There was that moment when she spoke to Saul in the Jedi, sorry, can't get my words out there. When they're in sort of a hallway of the Jedi Temple, and she's sort of like, "Oh, you want me to rejoin the Jedi?" And he's like, No. I kind of want to use you as bait. And then, yeah, I think she's realized that she wants to be back on this path again. I think if she makes it through to the end of the series, she'll be a Jedi again.
Kat, how does that work? If you leave the Jedi Order, can you come back? Is that something that they let you do?
I think in this case it would probably be allowed. Osha clearly left for her own personal reasons, and she does seem to be struggling with her Force connection, which I'm not sure if we've necessarily had something like that happen in the High Republic before, but we have had Jedi, like Elzar Mann. They feel that their connection to the Force has become tainted or weakened, and that they need to step back before going on to missions again, or becoming becoming a wayfinder. That's another thing that some of the Jedi do, where they go out looking for younglings and those gifted with the Force. So yes, I think she would definitely be allowed back into the Jedi if she wanted to take on those teachings again.
And do you think she will wield the lightsaber?
Well, if Saul falls, there's a lightsabers free.
Ooh, very wild, very tragic. That could be awesome. Jason, let's go. You don't think I've asked you. Just, do you think we're going to see Osha use the Force and go back to her Jedi teachings at some point? And do you think we'll see her wield a lightsaber?
I definitely think it's pointing in that direction, and I can see that happening. It'd be interesting to see if maybe the loss of soul could bring her back into the Order. That'd be quite interesting. Obviously, the other thing is with May, she seems to be on a redemption arc, so could the two sisters become a force-wielding force?
A dyad in the Force, almost, I suppose you could say. I think that brings an end to sort of everything I had that I wanted to talk about. Let's go to you, Kat. Just any closing thoughts on Acolyte, and where can the people find you on social media?
It was a very fast-paced episode. I enjoyed having another piece of this incomplete puzzle, so very much stoked for next week's, hopefully, continuation of the upcoming battle. And you can find me at Kat Kylo on Twitter, where I'm always happy to keep things positive and talk about Star Wars.
Chris, any closing thoughts on the Acolyte, and where can people find you on social media, and where can people find your awesome podcast, Dystopian Simulation Radio?
I think the next week is going to be a real make or break week. I think a lot of people are saying a lot of things about the show, and I think this next, now they've introduced the Dark Jedi, the Sith, whatever they're going to be, I think that's what's really going to make its mark on the series, why people will hopefully turn the tide on it a little bit. But I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to find out what happens and who survives and what's left of them. You can find me on my podcast, Dystopian Simulation Radio. We've got a new episode out this coming Monday, so come and listen to us there. I haven't edited it yet, which gives me all the scaries because I've got to do that, but it will be out early next week. So that's at Dystopian Simulation, at d.s.radio, or you can find us on all good podcast platforms under Dystopian Simulation Radio.
Jason, closing thoughts on the Acolyte, and where can people find you on social media?
Hang on in there, guys. I think this is a great story that we're being took on a bit of a ride, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going to take us. And as always, it's at Hondo Lane.
Yeah, I think, the show's only going to get wilder, and it's only going to get more tragic. I think we're going to see some Jedi fall next week. I think we're going to maybe see Osha have to make some choices, and May make some choices soon as well. And obviously, the exciting, tense thought of the reveal of who this Sith warrior could be, should he reveal himself, is very tantalizing. But you can find myself on social media. I am on X, and I am on Instagram at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can also find the podcast on X at Boars Star, and you can also find the podcast on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Star Wars Podcast. If you're listening on Apple Music or on Spotify, please leave us a top review. Nice little 5 stars, nice little sentence, makes all of us smile for a long time. Only takes you a few moments, and it also helps people find the show. And if you're listening on any of the other wonderful podcast platforms, again, just leave us a top review. Again, it makes us smile for a long time. It helps people find the show. And if you are leaving reviews, do share them on social media. You could be in for some goodies. But that is all from us. May the Force be with you all. Thank you for listening. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.
The Dorky Diva Show presents...
Why is this seat so much more comfortable?
The long-awaited sequel to the adventures of the Zolan Dart audio drama.
Have you seen the captain's datapad?
Trying to work, Murph.
Piloting the Zolan Dart by himself.
You do understand the details of this particular job, correct?
I've been on plenty of jobs like this. With you!
Reldar Sias returns to a planet he thought he'd left behind for good.
Is there a reason you didn't mention I was tagging along?
Hopefully having you there will make others think twice about messing with me.
Making new friends.
Oh, you must be the pilot of the Zolan Dart, yes?
I guess I am.
And reconnecting with old ones.
Reldar?
Vera?
What are you doing here?
until past grudges resurface.
I'd be minding my own business if I were you.
Well, if your business wasn't being handled right in front of my face, maybe I could mind my own business. We have to leave now.
Why the rush all of a sudden?
We're in trouble.
If it isn't little Reldar Soyth.
Hey, Yorick. Long time no see.
Roz already knows you're here.
Oh.
Look who decided to come home.
Reldar must confront his origin.
I must admit, I never saw this as being a part of your past, Softshell.
Or let it define his future.
I will get what is owed to me, no matter the cost.
Because what Roz is trying to do is wrong.
Says you.
My blasters, we're going to need these. Take that, Sleemo.
Who do you think you are?
The Adventures of the Zolan Dart, Episode 2, coming soon.